Hi everyone, I'm Beth from the West Dallas Public Library, and welcome to day 2 on our trip to the Tower of London in our Let's Go on Vacation book club. So as promised, we are picking up today with chapter 3, Prisoners and Rebels. So the tower is now built. The tower was built to defend the king and his family, for his family to live in. But it soon took on a third role. It became a place to keep prisoners. It was not an ordinary jail. You wouldn't find common crooks like thieves or murderers there. It was the place where the king put political prisoners. These were people who the king thought threatened his power. They might disagree with what he was doing, or he might be afraid they wanted to take the throne away from him. Many of the prisoners were rich and powerful. They were not locked in dungeon cells. They had comfortable apartments and servants. They could walk around the gardens. One prisoner even planted his own herb garden. The first prisoner we know of was a man named Randolph Flambard. He lived when William the Conqueror's son, William Rufus, was king. William Rufus was cruel and greedy. He took as much money in taxes from his people as he possibly could. Flambard was one of the main tax collectors. Most of Flambard's time was spent squeezing money out of the king's subjects. Everyone hated him. One day while hunting, King William Rufus was killed by an arrow shot by one of his own men. People claimed it was just an accident. Now, William Rufus's younger brother took the throne. His name was Henry. Henry wanted the people of England to support him, so he arrested Flambard and locked him in the tower. This arrest helped win support for Henry. After Flambard had been in prison for 6 months, he came up with a plan to escape. He had a rope smuggled to him in a barrel of oysters. Oh my goodness. He gave a party for his guards and got them very drunk. Then he used the rope to climb out the window. He had arranged for a horse to be waiting for him. He rode away to freedom. So the first important prisoner in the tower was also the first one to escape. Some prisoners were kings of other countries. When a king was captured, his country was supposed to ransom him. This means they paid the English government a lot of money to have their king set free. Even while they were captives, the kings continued to live like kings. For example, in 1357, a French king, John the Good, was a prisoner in the tower. On his first day there, he and his followers were fed with 74 loaves of bread, 21 gallons of wine, 3 sheep, 1 calf, and 13 chickens. That was his first day. Chapter 4. Besieged. Sometimes the tower had to protect the king from his own subjects. For most of his reign, King Henry III was fighting a war against the powerful lords who owned land in England. In 1267, a group of lords surrounded the Tower of London. Using catapults, they tried to break through the thick walls, but they were beaten back. Many of the fighters who helped the king win this battle were Jewish. The church didn't allow Christians to lend money for interest. So, only Jewish people could lend money. The kings of England often needed to borrow money, so they let Jewish moneylenders live in the area around the tower. Over the years, a large Jewish community grew up there. They were under the protection of the constable of the tower. When they were threatened, the Jews would go into the tower where they would be safe. So when the rebel lord's army attacked, these Jews fled to the tower. There, they bravely helped with the defense. In 1290, King Edward I kicked all the Jews out of England. But the road near the tower where they lived is still called Old Jewry. In 1380, the government needed extra money because of the high cost of fighting a long war known as the 100 Years' War. So the new king, Richard II, declared a new tax. Everyone over 15 years old in the kingdom had to pay 1 shilling. This was not much for a rich man, but for a poor worker, it was a full month's wage. So imagine if you have to pay 1 month of your salary. That's a lot. The peasants were already poor and starving. They had had enough. Headed by a leader named Wat Tyler, an army of more than 20,000 peasants marched on London. Another army of almost 70,000, led by Jack Straw, marched on London from another direction. King Richard II was only 14 years old. He went into the tower to be safe. The peasant army raged through London. They burned and destroyed the palaces of government officials. They killed anyone who looked rich or powerful. But the Tower of London was too strong for them. They couldn't break in. King Richard said he would meet with the peasant army outside London. He bravely rode out of the tower on his horse to the meeting place they had agreed on. But when the guards tried to close the tower gates after the king had left, 400 peasants were able to storm in. For the first time in its history, the Tower of London had an enemy army inside its walls. In the tower, the peasants found 4 of the government officials they hated most. They were hiding in the chapel. The peasants dragged them outside and cut their heads off on Tower Hill. These were the first executions to take place at the Tower of London. They would not be the last. Meanwhile, Richard was talking peacefully with the peasant army. He promised he would give them anything reasonable that they asked for. But on the way back, he heard about what had happened in the tower. Now he was angry. He arranged to meet with the peasant leaders again. This time, fighting broke out and Wat Tyler was killed. With their leader dead, the peasant army was ready to return home. They thought that Richard would keep his promise to them. But Richard said his promise didn't count because he had been forced to make it. He didn't keep it. The Peasants' Revolt didn't really change anything. Years later, in 1399, Richard II returned to the tower for a very different reason. When he grew up, he was a weak and flawed king. The throne was taken away from him by Henry IV. Henry put Richard in prison in the tower. While Richard was locked up, Henry forced him to agree to give up his claim to be king. Okay, so here's a little blurb called Order of the Bath. For his coronation, that's when he is declared king, in 1399, Henry IV created a special honor called the Knights of the Bath. The name meant exactly what it said. The night before the ceremony, 46 tubs of water were laid out in the tower. The 46 men being honored each had to take a bath to purify himself. Then they were given their new title. So they had to take a bath. Chapter 5, The Menagerie. When people think of the Tower of London, they usually think about human prisoners. But not only people were locked in the tower. For hundreds of years, the king's private zoo, called the menagerie, was located in the tower. The first animals were lions that arrived around the year 1210. People thought that lions were very noble animals. The lion was on the royal crest of England, so lions were a good choice for the king to own. In 1235, the European emperor, Frederick II, gave King Henry III 3 leopards as a present. Henry put them in the tower. Then he decided to add some other animals. Soon he also had lynxes, lions, and camels. The King of Norway gave Henry a big bear that was pure white. No one in England had seen a polar bear before. Finding enough fish for the bear was hard. The keepers decided to let it catch its own food. Some of the gates in the tower were water gates that opened right onto the River Thames. The keepers chained the bear to a water gate. Soon the people of London were treated to the amazing sight of a polar bear fishing for salmon in the Thames. The French king, Louis IX, gave Henry an animal like nothing people had ever seen. One that ate and drank using its long trunk. This was the first elephant in England. It was not easy to ship such an animal to London. After sailing on a boat to England, the elephant had to walk many miles to London. Huge crowds gathered to watch it go by. Unfortunately, no one really knew how to take care of an elephant. Hoping to keep it healthy, its keepers had it drink a gallon of wine a day. Should elephants drink wine? No! Unfortunately, the elephant only lived for 2 years. Soon the king had so many animals that he decided he needed to build them a real home. One of the towers was turned into a zoo. It was called the Lion Tower. For many years, the gate in the Lion Tower was the only way people could get into the tower. So anyone going to see the king had to pass by cages of lions and tigers. The animals weren't treated the way we treat zoo animals today. They lived in bare cages. Sometimes they were let out to fight with each other. Or a lion would be put in a cage with some dogs to see which was stronger. But the animals didn't always cooperate. One time, a lamb was put in with a lion. The lion just sniffed it and then lay down and ignored it. Of all the animals, the lions were treated with the greatest care. People believed that when a lion died, it meant the king or queen would die soon. So the keepers tried very hard to keep the lions healthy. The zoo in the tower lasted for about 600 years. It grew until it contained many animals. These included a porcupine and a kangaroo. It became a big attraction. At first, only people the king invited could see the zoo. Later on, any tourist could pay to see the animals. People think that the famous writer William Shakespeare might have visited the zoo. In his play Hamlet, he describes a porcupine. The tower was one of the only places in England where he could have seen one. In the 1700s, a room was built where people and monkeys could mix together. The monkeys were running loose. This lasted until a monkey attacked a small boy. Sometimes the animals fought each other. A rare bird had its head bitten off when it leaned into the cage of a hyena. People got hurt too. A girl was killed when she tried to pat a lion's paw. A small child was chased by a wolf that escaped from its cage. Then, the Duke of Wellington was put in charge of the tower. He was a famous soldier. He thought it was silly to keep all those animals in a place that was supposed to be a military site. So he had the animals sent away to the London Zoo. And by 1835, the Tower Zoo was gone. Okay, that is where we'll stop. Tomorrow we'll pick up with chapter 6, which is called The Two Little Princes in the Tower. I wonder what that means. We'll find out. Thanks for watching. I'm Miss Beth, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.